Warning: this video is graphic and may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. This video contains real dumbasses. Be advised.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you.
President Trump, thank you for the truly warm hospitality you and Melania have shown me, my wife Sarah, our entire delegation. I deeply value your friendship. To me, to the State of Israel, it was so clearly evident in the words you just spoke. Israel has no better ally than the United States. And I want to assure you, the United States has no better ally than Israel. Our alliance has been remarkably strong. But under your leadership, I'm confident it will get even stronger.
And I've devoted so much time over my life to Israel.
I look forward to working with you to dramatically upgrade our alliance in every field, in security, in technology, in cyber and trade, and so many others, and I certainly welcome your forthright call to ensure that Israel is treated fairly in international forums.
The very last thing this clan wants is for Israel to be treated fairly.
And that the slander and boycotts of Israel are resisted mightily by the power and moral position of the United States of America. As you have said, our alliance is based on a deep bond of common values and common interests. And increasingly, those values and interests are under attack by one malevolent force: radical Islamic terror. Mr. President, you've shown great clarity and courage in confronting this challenge head-on. You call for confronting Iran's terrorist regime,
While completely ignoring the far greater one.
preventing Iran from realizing this terrible deal into a nuclear arsenal.
Because the last thing the world wants is a rogue nuclear weapons state.
And you have said that the United States is committed to preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons.
And most of all, committed to ignoring yours.
You call for the defeat of ISIS. Under your leadership, I believe we can reverse the rising tide of radical Islam. And in this great task, as in so many others, Israel stands with you, and I stand with you. Mr. President, in rolling back militant Islam, we can seize an historic opportunity. Because for the first time in my lifetime, and for the first time in the life of my country, Arab countries in the region do not see Israel as an enemy, but increasingly as an ally. And I believe that under your leadership, this change in our region creates an unprecedented opportunity to strengthen security and advance peace.
Of course, this is Israel's idea of peace.
Let us seize this moment together. Let us bolster security. Let us seek new avenues of peace. and let us bring the remarkable alliance between Israel and the United States to even greater heights.
Is that even possible? Or is that just implying more American tax dollars?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Again, thank you.
Both of you have criticized the Iran nuclear deal and at times even called for its repeal. I'm wondering if you're concerned at all as it relates to not just the National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, who is recently no longer here, but also some of those events that have been going on with communication in Russia, if that is going to hamper this deal at all and whether or not it would keep Iran from becoming a nuclear state. And secondly, on the settlement issue, are you both on the same page? How do you exactly term that as it relates to the settlement issue? Thank you.
Michael Flynn, General Flynn, is a wonderful man. I think he's been treated very, very unfairly by the media, as I call it, the fake media in many cases. And I think it's really a sad thing that he was treated so badly. I think in addition to that, from intelligence, papers are being leaked, things are being leaked. It's criminal action, criminal act.
I recall him having a different tone when it happened to Hillary.
That she hid from the public and which were exposed by WikiLeaks. And by the way, just as I'm walking onto the stage, Mayor Giuliani said, "You're not going to believe this. Look at this. We have all of these new charges. Did you see it just came down today? WikiLeaks, some new stuff."
And it's been going on for a long time, before me. But now it's really going on. And people are trying to cover up for a terrible loss that the Democrats had under Hillary Clinton.
Who is still walking around free, by the way.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
I think it's very, very unfair what's happened to General Flynn, the way he was treated, and the documents and papers that were illegally, I stress that, illegally leaked.
That she hid from the public and which were exposed by WikiLeaks.
Very, very unfair. As far as settlements, I'd like to see you hold back on settlements for a little bit. We'll work something out, but I would like to see a deal be made. I think a deal will be made. I know that every president would like to. Most of them have not started till late because they never thought it was possible. And it wasn't possible because they didn't do it. But Bibi and I have known each other a long time. A smart man, great negotiator. And I think we're going to make a deal. It might be a bigger and better deal than people in this room even understand. That's a possibility. So let's see what we do.
Let's try it.
Doesn't sound too optimistic, but that's he's a good negotiator.
That's the art of the deal.
I also want to thank
Notice how everybody has to beg Israel to respect international law? Does anybody else find that strange?
I also want to thank Sarah. Could you please stand up? You're so lovely, and you've been so nice to Melania. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Mr. President, in your vision for the new Middle East peace, are you ready to give up of the notion of two-state solution that was adopted by previous administration? And will you be willing to hear different ideas from the Prime Ministers, as some of his partners are asking him to do, for example, annexation of parts of the West Bank and unrestricted settlement constructions? And one more question, are you going to fulfill your promise to move the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, and if so, when? And Mr. Prime Minister, did you come here tonight to tell the President that you are backing off the two-state solution? Thank you.
So I'm looking at two-state and one-state, and I like the one that both parties like. I'm very happy with the one that both parties like. I can live with either one. I thought for a while the two-state looked like it may be the easier of the two. But honestly, if Bibi and if the Palestinians, if Israel and the Palestinians are happy, I'm happy with the one they like the best. As far as the embassy moving to Jerusalem, I'd love to see that happen. We're looking at it very, very strongly. We're looking at it with great care, believe me, and we'll see what happens, okay?
Mr. Trump's comments have already sparked protests. If he follows through, Palestinian officials have said they will withdraw their recognition of Israel. Palestinians say Jerusalem is their capital too. The city contains some of the most important pilgrimage sites in Christianity and Islam.
My message to President Trump, please don't do it, because it is not going to have nice consequences on the political track.
Thank you. I read yesterday that an American official said that if you ask 5 people what 2 states would look like, you'd get 8 different answers. Well, Mr. President, if you asked 5 Israelis, you'd get 12 different answers.
Do you know what that was right there? That was an admission of the Israelis' in general insane mentality that have been so radicalized they actually believe theft is their right.
But rather than deal with labels, I want to deal with substance. It's something I've hoped to do for years in a world that's absolutely fixated on labels and not on substance. So here's the substance. There are 2 prerequisites for peace that I laid out several years ago, and they haven't changed. First, the Palestinians must recognize the Jewish state.
Palestinian officials have recognized Israel multiple times. It's actually the other way around. It's Israel that has yet to recognize the Palestinian people.
What will happen immediately if that embassy moves? I mean, you have talked about it being a red line, that you might be forced to withdraw the official recognition of the State of Israel. What will happen, you know, from the Palestinians and from the wider Arab world?
I'm not going to be speaking on behalf of the Arab world. I'm going to be speaking on behalf of the PLO and the Palestinians. We, in the PLO, we revoke our recognition of the State of Israel, because under no circumstances shall we recognize Israel, and the United States saying East Jerusalem is annexed.
They have to stop calling for Israel's destruction. They have to stop educating their people for Israel's destruction.
קבוצת אוהדים של בית"ר ירושלים שהגיעה לקניון מלחה בסוף משחק כדורגל ביום שני האחרון קראה קריאות גזעניות ותקפה עובדים ערבים שהיו במקום. הנה.
כך נשמעו בשבוע שעבר קבוצת אוהדים של בית"ר ירושלים, ניצחון על בני יהודה תל אביב. מכאן הדרך כבר הייתה קצרה לתגרה שהתפתחה.
Second, in any peace agreement, Israel must retain the overriding security control over the entire area west of the Jordan River. Because if we don't, we know what will happen. Because otherwise we'll get another radical Islamic terrorist state in the Palestinian areas, exploding the peace, exploding the Middle East.
And you can see another rocket going in from Israel, slowly making its way, presumably a precision-guided missile, coming into the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and it seems as though the bombardment has been very much in Beit Lahia. Now, the sound that you are hearing here, we're on the top of a hill, and I think you can probably see there are lots of Israelis gathered around who are cheering when they see these kinds of Israeli strikes. And it is an astonishing, macabre and an awful thing, really, to watch this display of fire in the air.
Now, unfortunately, the Palestinians vehemently reject both prerequisites for peace.
How dare they choose to exist?
First, they continue to call for Israel's destruction.
Their delirious chants are fused with biblical references. Settlers believe they have a divine right to the land in the West Bank and Jerusalem and see themselves as the flame holders of Israel's future. These nationalists are also religious fundamentalists.
Every single place, and every single land, every little spot, everything is the Jews. Not a single piece for other people, only for us. And we won't give anybody else, just for us. That's what we believe.
There's plenty of talk about revenge against the Palestinians. At times they appear like a sectarian football mob.
Inside their schools, inside their mosques, inside the textbooks. You have to read it to believe it.
Reflected in a poll out too, which suggests that 2/3 of Israelis do not ever expect peace with the Palestinians. The roots of that pessimism might partially stem back to the classroom, as Paula Sleer's been discovering.
A book entitled How to Be Citizens of Israel might not be everyone's cup of tea. But if you're a high school student in Israel, you don't have a choice. The new civics textbook is compulsory reading, and what it has to say is far from objective.
The goal is to show that the whole country belongs to the Jewish people, and the settlements are part of the state of Israel. You can even see the borders in the book. No one is even mentioning the people on the other side of this border. There's no mention of the occupation or the different law systems, one for Palestinians and one for Jews.
They even deny, Mr. President, our historical connection to our homeland.
Boy, have you lost your mind, because I'll help you find it.
Palestinians have lived there since biblical times. And look who elects to ignore that little fact.
Jews are not foreign colonialists in Judea. So unfortunately, the Palestinians not only deny the past, they also poison the present.
Says the man poisoning as many facts as he can.
The state of Israel, from its very beginning, was against Judaism, against Jewish teachings, against traditional Judaism.
They named public squares in honor of mass murderers who murdered Israelis.
Oh, just like Baruch Goldstein.
On February 25th, 1994, the day of the Jews' annual Purim festival, when each year they celebrate a massacre of 75,000 Persians, which they organized more than 2,500 years ago, Captain Goldstein entered a mosque in Hebron and murdered 29 Muslims who were kneeling in prayer, shooting them in the back with his army assault rifle. While he was reloading his assault rifle, surviving worshippers beat him to death. The Israeli government was not able to keep the massacre hushed up. Immediately after the massacre, one very prominent Orthodox leader, Rabbi Moshe Levinger, told a writer for Israel's largest newspaper that he was sorry for the 29 Palestinians murdered by Goldstein in the same way that he would be sorry for the killing of 29 flies. Another prominent Israeli religious leader, Rabbi Dov Lior, announced, and I quote, "Since Goldstein did what he did in God's own name, he is to be regarded as a righteous man." There was a huge funeral procession for Goldstein, and the Israeli army provided a guard of honor at his grave. One of the eulogists, Rabbi Israel Ariel, said, and I quote, "The holy martyr Baruch Goldstein is from now on our intercessor in heaven. Goldstein did not act as an individual. He heard the cry of the land of Israel, which is being stolen from us day after day by the Muslims. He acted to relieve that cry of the land." A year after the massacre, the Israeli government issued a permit to Goldstein's admirers to build a large monument at the site of his grave. Today, Goldstein's grave is one of the most popular sites in Israel for religious Jewish tourists, especially those from the United States.
For the services of the community to remove you physically. Thank you. Attention, please. The media is respectfully requested to locate themselves west.
What he did was, it was a courageous act, and I think it was a moral act.
We think he didn't kill enough, but thanks God, what he killed, it's good. It's a good beginning.
The most upsetting part of this whole thing isn't that the Arabs were killed. It was that Dr. Baruch Goldstein was killed.
I wish I had the guts to do it too.
they pay monthly salaries to the families of murderers. Now that has to change. I want it to change. Not only have I not abandoned these two prerequisites of peace, they become even more important because of the rising tide of fanaticism that has swept the Middle East and has also, unfortunately, infected Palestinian society.
AKA Zionism.
ואנחנו הבנים של עם ישראל, אנחנו הבנים של יעקב. ברצונו הקדוש ברוך הוא נתן לנו, שיבוא משיח בן דוד, אתם כולכם, תצלם רגע את כולם, תצלם את כולם. אתם כולכם, אתם תהיו עבדים שלנו אם תהיו ראויים, אם תתנהגו יפה. אתה רואה את הציצית הזאת? על כל ציצית אחת כזאת אתם תתפסו, ואתם יודעים שזה האמת. אז עכשיו, כדי שיהיה הכל בשלווה, ואנחנו רוצים שיהיה בשלווה, חצי אני גם רוצה לזרוע, וחצי אתם תזרעו. בסדר? ואתם, אם אנחנו נרצה, אתם תהיו העבדים שלנו. רק אם אנחנו נרצה. עכשיו, כרגע, אנחנו לא רוצים לעשות בעיות. אנחנו אומרים, אתם רוצים לחם, אנחנו רוצים לחם. נזרע חצי,
בסדר, אנחנו ניתן לכם לחם, אבל אנחנו, זה אדמה שלנו, לא ניתן לך.
מותק, אמרנו שיש שלום ויש שתי מדינות. מדינה ב-77.
צריך לי נחשי, אללה.
תלך תעשה לחם במדינה שלך.
פה זה המדינה שלי.
לא, זה לא נכון.
פה זה ארץ ישראל.
לא נכון.
פה זה ארץ שלי.
וזה של אבא שלי. האדמה הזאת היא של אבא שלי. והנה,
האדמה הזאת היא לא של אבא שלי.
של אבא שלי.
האדמה הזאת...
הנה, יש לי ניירות, זה של אבא שלי.
האדמה הזאת, זה שלנו, של ארץ ישראל, של יהודים. אתה יודע טוב.
So I want this to change. I want those two prerequisites of peace, substance, not labels. I want them reinstated. But if anyone believes that I, as Prime Minister of Israel, responsible for the security of my country, would blindly walk into a Palestinian terrorist state that seeks the destruction of my country.
Does anybody else see the massive hypocrisy going on right now?
We have to look for new ways, new ideas on how to reinstate them and how to move peace forward. And I believe that the great opportunity for peace comes from a regional approach, from involving our newfound Arab partners in the pursuit of a broader peace and peace with the Palestinians. And I greatly look forward to discussing this in detail with you, Mr. President, because I think that if we work together, we have a shot.
And we have been discussing that, and it is something that is very different, hasn't been discussed before, and it's actually a much bigger deal, a much more important deal in a sense. It would take in many, many countries, and it would cover a very large territory. So,
openly talking about the Greater Israel Project, which is well documented, by the way. Look how it takes Trump off guard. Shit, man, you're not supposed to talk about that.
I didn't know you were going to be mentioning that, but that's now that you did. I think it's a terrific thing. And I think we have some pretty good cooperation from people that in the past would never, ever have even thought about doing this. So we'll see how that works out. Okay? Katie from Town Hall. Where's Katie? Right there. Katie?
Thank you, Mr. President. You said in your earlier remarks that both sides will have to make compromises when it comes to a peace deal. You've mentioned a halt on settlements. Can you lay out a few more specific compromises that you have in mind, both for the Israelis and for the Palestinians? And Mr. Prime Minister, what expectations do you have from the new administration about how to either amend the Iran nuclear agreement or how to dismantle it altogether, and how to overall work with the new administration to combat Iran's increased aggression, not only in the last couple of months, but the past couple of years as well?
It's actually an interesting question. I think that the Israelis are going to have to show some flexibility, which is hard. It's hard to do. They're going to have to show the fact that they really want to make a deal. I think our new concept that we've been discussing actually for a while is something that allows them to show more flexibility than they have in the past, because you have a lot bigger canvas to play with. And I think they'll do that. I think they very much would like to make a deal, or I wouldn't be happy, and I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be as optimistic as I am. I really think I can tell you from the standpoint of Bibi and from the standpoint of Israel, I really believe they want to make a deal, and they'd like to see the big deal. I think the Palestinians have to get rid of some of that hate that they're taught from a very young age. They're taught tremendous hate. I've seen what they're taught.
פה הייתי פעם שנייה כבר, זה חיל השריון, יד השריון, חיל הים הייתי באשדוד, מצודת יואב, מורשת של חיל גבעתי.
מה כשאתה לוקח רימון ביד, איך מפעילים אותו?
אתה פותח את הפקק ואז זורק אותו, את המצרה, ואז אתה זורק אותו לעבר האויב.
ומה הבעיה?
בצבא בחיל גבעתי, בעורב.
הוא היה בגבעתי. ומה אתה רוצה להיות?
גם, להמשיך אותו.
אני חושבת שאני אהיה חיילת קרבית.
כן?
שריון.
אז אתה רוצה להיות תותחן שתהיה גדול? אתה רוצה להיות בתותחנים?
כן.
ואיפה אתה רוצה להיות?
בחיל האוויר, לראות טילים מהאוויר.
כשאתם נמצאים על הטנק, אתם מדמיינים משהו?
הם כאילו במלחמה ויורים על הטנק ומנסים לפגוע בי.
מה דמיינת?
שאני הורגת אנשים. הם מסורי והם לובשים מדים בצבע חום ירוק. ערבים.
אני מדמיין שכל פעם אני רואה מולי ערבי מת, זה ממש שמח אותי כבר יותר.
ומה אתה מדמיין שאתה נמצא על טנק?
כלום! ערבים שחושבים אחריי, שרוצים להרוג אותי.
באת לטנק, יורה בכולם, טק 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 טק, הורגת את כולם? איך הרגש?
הרגשתי מאושרת.
איפה בצבא היית רוצה לשרת? בצפון, בשטחים, בעזה, ביהודה ושומרון?
לבנון, הייתי הכי רוצה בלבנון.
איפה היית רוצה להילחם?
בעזה.
אבל עכשיו החזרנו את לבנון, אז אין לנו מלחמה בלבנון.
לא נורא, נחזיר אותם לשם עוד פעם.
אתה מקווה שעד שאתה תהיה חייל, תהיה לנו מלחמה כבר עם לבנון עוד פעם?
כן.
And you can talk about flexibility there too, but it starts at a very young age, and it starts in the schoolroom.
He's right. It does start in the classroom. Just check out these Tel Aviv kindergartners.
ילדים, אנחנו נדבר על המילה שלום. מי יכול להגיד לי מה צריך כדי לעשות שלום?
איזה שלום? עם מי נעשה שלום? אין בכלל עם מי לדבר שם.
נכון ליאלי, אין עם מי לדבר שם.
הייתי שמאלנית אבל התפכחתי. הוכח, עקירת יישובים לא מביא שלום.
אז למה בעולם כועסים עלינו?
הבעיה שלנו זה הסברה. צה"ל צבא מוסרי. הבעיה שלנו זה הסברה.
רגע חמוד, אבל עוד ילדים רוצים להגיד את התשובה הזאת, נכון? אנחנו לא רוצים לגדל פה בורים. אנחנו מלמדים אותם גיאוגרפיה כבר מגיל צעיר. הנה ישראל הקטנה שלנו במזרח התיכון. מי יודע?
הבעיה שלנו זה הסברה.
כן, חמוד, אבל עוד לא גמרתי את השאלה, נכון? מי יודע איך קוראים לשאר העולם?
אנטישמיה.
עכשיו, אתם רוצים שנשחק בשלא יטיפו לנו מוסר? איטלקים.
חברו לנאצים בשואה.
צרפתים.
משטר וישי.
והטורקים.
טבחו בארמנים.
תשובה לא מלאה.
וגם בכורדים.
נורווגיה.
הרגו את כל הסלמונים.
אז מה אנחנו אומרים לעולם?
שלא יטיפו לנו מוסר. לא יהיה עוד ראוי. תן להם את יהודה ושומרון והם ירצו את חיפה, ככה זה הערבים.
אנחנו אומרים פה ערבים, חמודה.
סליחה, נטל דמוגרפי.
And they have to acknowledge Israel. They're going to have to do that. There's no way a deal can be made if they're not ready to acknowledge a very, very great and important country.
You see how they just consistently lie over and over again? Do you see this? Like, Palestine has recognized Israel. It's the other way around. Somebody once mentioned if you repeat propaganda enough times, it becomes the truth.
If you've retired, you don't have anything to worry about. It's the third time I've said that. I'll probably say it 3 more times. See, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda.
But now I also believe we're going to have, Katie, other players at a very high level, and I think it might make it easier on both the Palestinians and Israel to get something done. Okay? Thank you. Very interesting question. Thank you.
You asked about Iran. One thing is preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons, something that President Trump and I think, are deeply committed to do, and we are obviously going to discuss that.
Look at the propaganda shooting out of this guy's mouth, and he gets away with it. And it offers provocation after provocation, Mr. Netanyahu said. Okay? Let's tie the anti-Iranian deal together. Trump, Israel, settlers, get your mind off the other issues as we steal land and blame it on the Iranians.
I think beyond that, President Trump has led a very important effort in the past few weeks. Just coming into the presidency, he pointed out there are violations, Iranian violations on ballistic missile tests. By the way, these ballistic missiles are inscribed in Hebrew. Israel must be destroyed.
You know, I haven't seen any evidence of those claims, just articles on them, and they're just claims. They actually don't offer any evidence. But I have undeniable evidence of somebody else writing Hebrew signs on bombs.
The Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif said, well, our ballistic missiles are not intended against any country. No. They write on the missile in Hebrew, Israel must be destroyed. So, challenging Iran on its violations of ballistic missiles, imposing sanctions on Hezbollah, preventing them, making them pay for the terrorism that they foment throughout the Middle East and beyond, well beyond.
And yet still zero sanctions on Israel. Kind of boggles the mind, doesn't it?
I think that's a change that is clearly evident since President Trump took office. I welcome that. I think it's let me say this very openly. I think it's long overdue.
You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity.
And I think that if we work together, and not just the United States and Israel, but so many others in the region who see eye to eye on the great magnitude and danger of the Iranian threat.
What you've just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Then I think we can roll back Iran's aggression and danger.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
And that's something that is important for Israel, the Arab states, but I think it's vitally important for America. These guys are developing ICBMs. They want to get to a nuclear arsenal, not a bomb, 100 bombs. And they want to have the ability to launch them everywhere on Earth, and including, and especially, eventually, the United States.
Come on, don't bullshit me. Bullshit. 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 Bullshit.
So this is something that is important for all of us. I welcome the change, and I intend to work with President Trump very closely so that we can thwart this danger.
Great. You have somebody?
Boav?
Mr. President, since your election campaign and even after your victory, we've seen a sharp rise in anti-Semitic incident across the United States. And I wonder, what do you say to those among the Jewish community in the States and in Israel and maybe around the world who believe and feel that your administration is playing with xenophobia and maybe racist tones. And Mr. Prime Minister, do you agree to what the President just said about the need for Israel to restrain and to stop settlement activity in the West Bank? And a quick follow-up on my friend's questions. Simple question. Do you back off from your vision to the end of the conflict of two-state solution as you lay out in Bar Ilan speech, or you still support it? Thank you.
Well, I just want to say that we are, very honored by the victory that we had, 306 electoral college votes. We were not supposed to crack 220. You know that, right? There was no way to 221, but then they said there's no way to 270. And there's tremendous enthusiasm out there. I will say that we are going to have peace in this country. We are going to stop crime in this country.
Wow, did Trump just say he is going to bring peace and no crime into America? Somebody thinks highly of themselves.
We are going to do everything within our power to stop long simmering racism and every other thing that's going on, because a lot of bad things have been taking place over a long period of time. I think one of the reasons I won the election is we have a very, very divided nation, very divided. And hopefully I'll be able to do something about that. And it was something that was very important to me. As far as people, Jewish people, so many friends, a daughter who happens to be here right now, a son-in-law, and 3 beautiful grandchildren. I think that you're going to see a lot different United States of America over the next 3, 4, or 8 years. I think a lot of good things are happening, and you're going to see a lot of love. You're going to see a lot of love.
But sometimes pussies get so full of shit that they become assholes themselves.
Okay, thank you.
I believe that the issue of the settlements is not the core of the conflict, nor does it really drive the conflict. I think it's an issue. It has to be resolved in the context of peace negotiations. And I think we also are going to speak about it, President Trump and I, so we can arrive at an understanding, so we don't keep on bumping into each other all the time on this issue, and we're going to discuss this. On the question you said, you just came back with your question to the problem that I said. It's the label. What does Abu Mazen mean by 2 states, okay? What does he mean? A state that doesn't recognize the Jewish state?
No, God! No! No! No!
A state that basically is open for attack against Israel? What are we talking about? Are we talking about Costa Rica, or are we talking about another Iran? So obviously it means different things. I told you what are the conditions that I believe are necessary for an agreement. It's the recognition of the Jewish state, and it's Israel's security control of the entire area. Otherwise, we're just fantasizing. Otherwise, we'll get another failed state, another terrorist Islamist dictatorship that will not work for peace, but work to destroy us, but also destroy any hope for a peaceful future for our people. So I've been very clear about those conditions, and they haven't changed. I haven't changed. If you read what I said 8 years ago, it's exactly that. And I repeated that again and again and again.
That is true. He's always been a psychopath.
If you want to deal with labels, deal with labels. I'll deal with substance. And finally, if I can respond to something that I know from personal experience. I've known President Trump for many years. And to allude to him, or to his people, his team, some of whom I've known for many years too. Can I reveal, Jared, how long we've known you? Well, he was never small. He was always big. He was always tall. But
also true. On one of Netanyahu's visits to New York, Jared gave up his own bed to Bibi, as he probably refers to him as Uncle Bibi.
I've known the president and I've known his family and his team for a long time. And there is no greater supporter of the Jewish people and the Jewish state than President Donald Trump.
But my father, Fred, was always a big supporter. So I grew up in that environment. I grew up in Brooklyn, Queens, and Israel was always very paramount in our mind. In fact, I've been sometimes criticized because I received so many awards from Jewish groups, and they look at my wall. It's loaded up. But now the Christians are catching up, I have to tell you. My Christians are liking me a lot lately.
I think we should put that to rest.
Thank you very much. Very nice. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Mr. President, are you going to answer any questions about your associated contacts with the Russians during the campaign? Mr. President,